They left her on the frozen cliff to die because her eyes didn't match. One brown, one blue, proof enough for the superstitious villagers that evil had entered their world. When the Apache warrior found her hours later, lips turning blue and breath fading, he saw what her own people couldn't, a child marked not by darkness, but by the Great Spirit itself. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go! The winter wind howled through the mountains of northern Arizona with a ferocity that seemed to echo the screams coming from inside the small wooden cabin. It was January 1872, and Margaret Whitmore gripped the bedsheets with white-knuckled fists as another wave of pain crashed through her body. The midwife, Mrs. Eleanor Patterson, a stern woman with grey hair pulled back so tightly it seemed to stretch her face, worked with practiced efficiency beside the bed. "Push now, Margaret. I can see the head," Eleanor commanded, her voice sharp and clinical. Outside, Thomas Whitmore paced in the snow, his breath forming small clouds in the frigid air. His hands trembled not from cold, but from anticipation. This would be their first child after 5 years of marriage, 5 years of prayer and hope. Behind him stood 3 other men from the village of Prescott Ridge, the Reverend, the town elder, and the blacksmith, all waiting to hear the cry that would announce new life. Inside, the moment arrived. Margaret gave one final desperate push, and the baby slipped into Eleanor's waiting hands. But instead of the joyful cry they expected, there was only silence. A terrible, heavy silence that filled the room like smoke. Eleanor's face, already severe, turned to stone. Her eyes widened, and her mouth formed a thin line of shock and something darker, disgust, mixed with fear. "What is it?" Margaret gasped, reaching desperately toward her child. "Why isn't she crying? Please let me see my baby." Eleanor didn't respond immediately. She stared at the infant with an expression that would haunt Margaret for the rest of her days. The baby was small, perfectly formed, with a healthy pink color spreading across her skin as she took her first breaths. But her eyes, when they fluttered open in that dimly lit room, revealed something that made Eleanor's blood run cold. The right eye was a warm, deep brown, the color of rich earth. The left eye was a pale, crystalline blue, like winter sky reflected in ice, 2 completely different colors staring up from the same tiny face. "Demon child," Eleanor whispered, her voice trembling. "This baby bears the mark of evil." "What? No! Give her to me!" Margaret tried to sit up, but her body was too weak, still bleeding and exhausted from the labor. Tears streamed down her face as she reached toward Eleanor, who pulled the baby away from her outstretched arms. The midwife wrapped the infant in a rough cloth, not with the tenderness usually afforded to newborns, but with the hesitant care one might use when handling something dangerous. The baby, perhaps sensing the rejection, finally began to cry, a small, pitiful sound that seemed to beg for the comfort being denied to her. "Thomas!" Eleanor called out sharply, moving toward the door. "Thomas Whitmore, come inside, now!" The door burst open, and Thomas entered with hope bright in his eyes, followed closely by the 3 men. Is the baby well? Is Margaret—" His words died in his throat when he saw Eleanor's face and heard the strange, weak crying. She pulled back the cloth just enough to reveal the baby's face, and specifically, her eyes. The men recoiled as if struck. "Merciful God," the Reverend breathed, making the sign of the cross. "I've heard of such things in the old texts. Heterochromia, they call it in the medical books, but in Scripture it's known as the mark of divided soul." That's not true," Thomas stammered, but his voice lacked conviction. His face had gone pale, and he couldn't stop staring at his daughter's mismatched eyes. Fear, superstition, and shock warred across his features. "The child is cursed," Elder Morrison declared, his voice grave and final. He was the oldest man in Prescott Ridge, respected and feared in equal measure. She will bring misfortune to this house and to this village. I've seen such marks before, 40 years ago in the old country. The family that kept that child suffered plague, fire, and madness. No, please, Margaret sobbed from the bed, trying desperately to rise. She's just a baby. She's our baby. Please don't. But Eleanor had already wrapped the infant more tightly, her expression set and cold. The council must decide. This is beyond a mother's wishes, when the safety of the entire community is at stake. That night, the village council met in the small church, while Margaret lay in her bed, delirious with fever and grief. Thomas sat with his head in his hands as the men debated the fate of his daughter. Some argued for mercy, suggesting the child be sent to an orphanage in the distant city where her affliction might go unnoticed among strangers. Others demanded more immediate action. "We cannot risk keeping such evil within our borders," Elder Morrison insisted. "The old ways taught us how to handle such matters. The child must be returned to the wilderness from which such darkness surely came. Let nature decide her fate." The Reverend, torn between his religious teachings and his fear, finally acquiesced. Perhaps it is God's will that we test whether this child is truly blessed or cursed. If she survives the night in the wilderness, we will know the Lord has a purpose for her. If not, he left the rest unsaid. Thomas wanted to protest, wanted to fight for his daughter, but fear paralyzed him. He thought of his wife, still weak and feverish. He thought of their future children. He thought of the prosperity of the village. And in that moment of weakness, he made a choice he would regret for the rest of his life. He nodded. Before dawn, while Margaret slept fitfully under the influence of laudanum administered by Eleanor, 3 men rode out into the frozen wilderness. The blacksmith held the bundled infant who had finally stopped crying, whether from exhaustion or resignation, no one could say. They rode for 2 hours until they reached a place the locals called Devil's Edge, a treacherous canyon where the cliff dropped away into a rocky abyss below. The snow had stopped falling, and the sky was beginning to lighten with the approach of dawn. The men dismounted, and the blacksmith placed the small bundle on a flat rock near the cliff's edge, far enough back that she wouldn't roll, but close enough to the precipice that her fate seemed sealed. "May God have mercy on her soul," the Reverend muttered, making the sign of the cross once more. Then they mounted their horses and rode away, none of them looking back, each man telling himself that they were doing what was necessary to protect their community. The baby lay alone in the cold morning air, wrapped in her rough cloth, her mismatched eyes staring up at the lightening sky. The temperature continued to drop, and frost began to form on the edges of her blanket. Her lips started to turn blue. She was too weak to cry anymore, and in the vast silence of the wilderness, there was no one to hear her if she had. But the mountains held their own witnesses. High on a ridge overlooking Devil's Edge, a young Apache warrior named Takoda had been tracking a deer since before sunrise. He was 23 years old, lean and strong, with keen eyes that missed nothing in the landscape he'd known since childhood. As he moved silently through the snow, he heard something that didn't belong in this place. A sound so faint he almost dismissed it as wind. But Takoda had learned long ago to trust his instincts. He changed direction, moving toward the source of the sound. As he approached the edge of the canyon, he saw them. 3 white men on horseback, riding away in haste. His hand moved instinctively to the knife at his belt, but they were already too far away and hadn't seen him. Curious and cautious, Takoda approached the spot where the men had been. That's when he saw the bundle on the rock. His breath caught in his throat. He knelt beside the small form, his heart pounding as he gently pulled back the cloth. A baby. A tiny, freezing baby with skin turning blue from the cold. But it was her eyes that made him pause. one brown, one blue, staring up at him with a clarity that seemed impossible in one so young. In his culture, such uniqueness was not a curse but a blessing, a sign that the Great Spirit had touched this child with special purpose. Without hesitation, Takoda scooped the baby into his arms, tucking her inside his fur-lined coat against his chest. He could feel how cold she was, how close to death. He began running, not toward the village of white men who had abandoned her, but toward his own people's winter camp, 3 miles to the north. "Hold on, little one," he whispered in his own language, his breath warm against her face. "Hold on. I have you now." The baby, perhaps feeling warmth and safety for the first time in her short life, made a small sound, not quite a cry, but a sigh. Her tiny fingers curled against his chest, grasping at his buckskin shirt. And as Takoda ran through the snow with the rising sun at his back, neither of them knew that this moment would change not just their lives, but the lives of countless others. Behind them, the cliff stood silent, a witness to both cruelty and compassion. And far away in Prescott Ridge, Margaret Whitmore woke to find her arms empty and her heart broken, while Thomas could not meet his wife's eyes as he told her their daughter had been taken by the cold in the night. But the truth was different. The baby lived. And her eyes, those extraordinary, different-colored eyes, would see a world far richer and more loving than the one that had rejected her. Takoda burst into the winter camp with his chest heaving from the desperate run through the snow. The small cluster of lodges stood in a protected valley, smoke rising from their centers into the grey morning sky. Women tending fires looked up in alarm at his sudden arrival, and men emerged from their shelters with hands on their weapons, ready for danger. "Nashota!" Takoda called out, his voice urgent. "I need Nashota!" An elderly woman with silver hair braided with strips of red cloth emerged from the largest lodge. Her face was weathered like ancient stone, carved with deep lines that spoke of wisdom earned through countless winters. Nashota was the tribe's healer, a woman whose knowledge of medicine and spirit had saved many lives over her 70 years. She took one look at Takoda's face, and the bundle pressed against his chest, and her expression shifted from curiosity to immediate concern. "Bring her inside. Quickly now." Takoda followed her into the warm lodge, where a fire burned bright and steady in the center. The interior smelled of sage, cedar, and something sweet he couldn't identify. Nashota gestured to a pile of soft furs near the fire, and Takoda carefully laid the baby down, his hands shaking now that the adrenaline of his rescue was fading. "Where did you find her?" Nashota asked as she unwrapped the rough cloth, her experienced hands moving with practiced gentleness. Her breath caught when she saw the baby's face, not from fear, but from wonder. The mismatched eyes stared up at her, and a slow smile spread across the old woman's face. "Near Devil's Edge," Takoda explained, his words tumbling out rapidly. "White men left her there. They rode away. She was freezing, Nashota. I thought I was too late." "You were not too late," Nashota said firmly, running her hands over the baby's small body, checking for injuries. "The Great Spirit guided you to her for a reason." "Look at her eyes, Takoda. Do you know what this means?" He shook his head, kneeling beside them. Other tribe members had begun gathering at the entrance of the lodge, drawn by the commotion. Among them was Takoda's mother, Chenoa, and his younger sister, Ayana, who was 17 and curious about everything. "In the old stories," Nashota continued, warming a fur blanket near the fire before wrapping it around the infant, "those born with eyes of different colors are called those who see both worlds. They can see with the vision of earth and sky, of water and fire. They are chosen ones, marked by the spirits themselves. The white people think it's a curse, Takoda said bitterly. They left her to die because of it. A murmur of anger and disbelief rippled through the gathered people. Chenoa pushed forward, her face a mixture of maternal concern and indignation. She was a strong woman of 45, with graying hair and eyes that mirrored her son's intensity. "What kind of people abandon their own child?" she demanded. "What kind of hearts must they have?" "Hearts of stone," Ayana whispered, peering over her mother's shoulder at the baby. "May I hold her?" Nashota nodded, and Ayana carefully lifted the infant into her arms. The baby had stopped shivering now that she was warm, and her eyes tracked Ayana's face with an alertness that seemed remarkable for one so young. When Ayana smiled, the baby's lips moved as if trying to smile back. "She's beautiful," Ayana breathed. "What will we call her?" "That is not for us to decide yet," said a deep voice from the entrance. Everyone turned to see Kuruk, the tribe's chief, entering the lodge. He was a tall man of 50 with broad shoulders and a face that commanded respect without demanding it. 2 long scars ran down his left cheek, memories of a battle fought long ago. Kuruk approached the fire and looked down at the baby in Ayana's arms. His expression, usually stern and unreadable, softened considerably. "Tell me what happened, Takoda." Takoda recounted the story again. Finding the men, discovering the abandoned child, the desperate run back to camp. As he spoke, Kuruk's jaw tightened and his hands clenched into fists. "The white men grow more cruel with each passing season," Kuruk said when Takoda finished. "But this child is no longer theirs. She is ours now, if we choose to accept her." He looked around at the gathered faces. "A white child raised among our people will face challenges from both worlds. Are we prepared for that?" "She is not white or Apache," Nashota said firmly, rising to her feet despite her age. "She is a child, a baby who needs food, warmth, and love. That is what she is. The rest is just words and fear." Chenoa stepped forward. "I will feed her," she announced. "My sister Kimimela just lost her own baby last month. She still has milk and an empty heart that needs filling. We can share the feeding between us." "And I will help care for her," Ayana added quickly, still cradling the infant as if she'd been doing it her whole life. "Please, Father. We cannot turn her away." Kuruk looked at his daughter, then at his wife, then at the baby. The infant chose that moment to wrap her tiny fingers around Ayana's thumb, holding on with surprising strength. Something in that simple gesture seemed to decide the matter. "Very well," Kuruk said. "But understand this. If we take this child, she becomes one of us completely. She will be raised in our ways, speak our language, learn our customs. When the white men come looking, and they will come, we must be prepared to defend our choice." "They won't come," Takoda said with certainty. "They wanted her gone. They left her to die. In their hearts, she's already dead." "Then we give her new life," Nashota declared, "and a new name when the time is right. For now, she needs rest, food, and warmth." She looked directly at Takoda. "You saved her life today. In our ways, that creates a bond. You are responsible for her now, as much as any father would be." Takoda felt the weight of those words settle over him like a mantle. He was young, unmarried, with no children of his own. But when he looked at the baby's unusual eyes staring up at him from Ayana's arms, he felt something shift in his chest. A fierce protectiveness, a sense of purpose he'd never experienced before. "I understand," he said quietly. "I will protect her. Always." Outside the lodge, snow began to fall again, soft and silent. But inside, warmed by fire and surrounded by people who saw her not as cursed, but as blessed, the baby finally closed her eyes and slept deeply for the first time in her short life. Chenoa began preparing a mixture of herbs and warm water to clean the baby properly, while Kimimela was summoned to provide milk. the lodge filled with the quiet bustle of women working together, their voices low and soothing. Takoda sat by the fire, watching as his people, his family, welcomed this abandoned child with open hearts. He thought about the white men who'd left her on that cliff, and he felt no anger, only pity. They had thrown away something precious because they couldn't see past their own fear. But he could see. And what he saw in those different colored eyes was not a curse or a demon. He saw a survivor. He saw potential. He saw a little girl who would grow up knowing she was wanted, knowing she was loved, knowing she belonged. "Thank you," he whispered to the Great Spirit, "for letting me hear her cries, for guiding my feet to that place, for this gift." And in the warmth of that lodge, surrounded by the scent of sage and cedar, a new story began. One that would prove that family is not defined by blood or the color of one's eyes, but by the courage to love without condition. 3 months had passed since that frozen morning when Takoda carried the abandoned baby into the warmth of the Apache camp. Spring was beginning to touch the Arizona mountains, melting the snow and coaxing green shoots from the earth. And in that same time, the baby had transformed from a fragile, blue-lipped infant into a thriving child with round cheeks and a laugh that made everyone smile. She had been given a name in a ceremony held under the full moon, Ista Nonpa, which meant 2 eyes in their language. Some had suggested hiding her uniqueness with a more common name, but Nashota had been firm. "We do not hide gifts from the Great Spirit," she'd said. "We celebrate them." And so Ista Nonpa she became, though most called her simply Ista. The baby had quickly stolen the hearts of everyone in the camp. She smiled easily, reaching for faces with chubby hands, and her different-colored eyes seemed to track everything around her with unusual intensity and intelligence. Takoda had kept his promise. Every day, he spent hours with her, holding her while she slept, making her laugh with funny faces, teaching her to recognize his voice. He carved small toys from wood, a bird, a horse, a turtle, and hung them above the corner of Chenoa's lodge, where Ista slept. At night, he sang to her the old songs his own mother had sung to him. "You're going to spoil that child," Chenoa teased one evening as Takoda rocked Ista to sleep for the 3rd time. "She'll never learn to settle on her own if you come running every time she fusses." "She's not fussing," Takoda defended, looking down at the baby's face. One brown eye and one blue eye were both closed now, her breathing deep and even. She just wanted company. Ayana, sitting nearby and working on a beaded dress, laughed softly. "He won't admit it, Mother, but he's completely captured. I've never seen my brother so gentle with anything." It was true. Something about Ista had reached into Takoda's heart and planted itself there like a seed. He'd saved her life, yes, but somehow she had saved something in him too. A part of himself he hadn't known was missing. The responsibility of caring for her gave his days purpose and his nights meaning. But not everyone in the camp had embraced Ista so completely. Some of the older members still harbored doubts, whispering concerns when they thought no one was listening. Chief among them was Hania, an elderly warrior who had fought against white soldiers for most of his life and carried deep scars, both visible and invisible, from those battles. One afternoon, as Takoda played with Ista near the stream, letting her tiny feet splash in the shallow water while she squealed with delight, Hania approached. His face was stern, his posture rigid. "The child is thriving," he observed, though his tone suggested this was not entirely a good thing. "She is," Takoda agreed, not looking up from Ista's joyful face. "She grows stronger every day." "Strong enough to bring trouble when the white men discover her here," Hania said bluntly. "Have you considered that, young warrior? Have you thought about what will happen when they come looking?" Takoda finally raised his eyes to meet Hania's. "They abandoned her. They wanted her dead. Why would they come for her now?" "Because she is white," Hania replied. "And the white men do not like it when their own live among us. learning our ways, becoming one of us. They call it going savage. I have seen them burn villages to retrieve white children, even when those children begged to stay with their adopted families. A chill ran through Takoda despite the warm spring air. He held Ista closer, his arms tightening protectively around her. Then we will hide her if they come. We will protect her. Can you hide those eyes? Hania gestured toward Ista's face. Those unusual eyes that mark her wherever she goes. That child will never be invisible, Takoda. She carries her uniqueness like a banner. That uniqueness is a blessing, not a curse, Takoda said firmly, echoing Nashota's words. To us, perhaps, Hania acknowledged, but to her own people, it was reason enough to cast her out. What makes you think they won't use it as an excuse to take her back, to save her from us? They will say we stole a cursed white child, and they will use it as justification for whatever violence they wish to inflict. The old warrior's words settled heavy on Takoda's shoulders, but before he could respond, Kuruk's voice cut through the tension. Hania speaks from experience and wisdom, the chief said, approaching them with Nashota at his side. But he also speaks from old wounds that have not healed. Come, let us talk of this together. They moved to a shaded area beneath a large cottonwood tree, and Kuruk gestured for them all to sit. Ista, comfortable in Takoda's arms, played with a leather cord around his neck, fascinated by the small stone pendant attached to it. The concern Hania raises is valid, Kuruk began, his voice measured and calm. We must be prepared for the possibility that the white settlements will learn of Ista's presence among us, but I do not believe hiding her or sending her away is the answer. She is one of us now. She will always be white, Hania insisted. Her skin will not darken with the sun as ours does. Her hair will not grow black and straight. When she is older, every person who sees her will know she does not belong. Belonging is not about skin or hair, Nashota said sharply. It is about heart and spirit. This child's heart beats in rhythm with ours. Her spirit knows no other home. To send her away would be to tear out a piece of ourselves. Hania was silent for a long moment, his weathered face unreadable. Finally he spoke again, his voice softer. I do not wish the child harm. I wish only to protect our people from the consequences of this choice. The white men are not kind to those who harbor what they consider theirs. Then we prepare, Kuruk decided. We train our warriors. We establish lookouts. We create plans for quick evacuation if needed, but we do not abandon this child a second time. She was thrown away once because of fear. We will not do the same. Takoda felt relief flood through him, though Hania's warning still echoed in his mind. He looked down at Ista, who had fallen asleep against his chest, her little fist still clutching his pendant. One small hand was visible, fingers curled in complete trust and peace. I will die before I let anyone take her, Takoda said quietly, but with absolute conviction. Nashota reached over and placed her wrinkled hand on his shoulder. Let us pray it never comes to that. But know this, young warrior, you are not alone in this promise. We all stand with you, and we all stand with her. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, the small group sat together in the fading light. Each of them carried concerns and hopes, fears and determination. But they were united in one thing. The sleeping child with two different colored eyes had become one of their own, and they would protect their own, no matter the cost. That night, as Takoda laid Ista in her sleeping furs and watched her chest rise and fall with the steady rhythm of innocent dreams, he whispered a prayer to the Great Spirit. Give me strength to keep her safe. Give me wisdom to raise her well, and if the day comes when I must fight for her, give me courage to do what is right. Outside, the stars began to emerge, countless points of light in the darkening sky. And somewhere, many miles away in Prescott Ridge, Margaret Whitmore stared out her window at those same stars, wondering if her daughter had suffered in those final moments, and wishing with all her broken heart that she had fought harder to keep her. But the truth was different. Her daughter was not suffering. Her daughter was loved, and her daughter was home. 5 years passed like water flowing through the mountains, sometimes swift, sometimes slow, but always moving forward. Ista Nompa was no longer the fragile infant rescued from the cliff's edge. She had become a spirited child with wild light brown hair that refused to be tamed, sun-kissed skin, and those remarkable eyes that still caught everyone's attention, one the color of rich earth, the other like pale winter sky. She was small for her age, but quick and fearless, climbing trees higher than children twice her size, and running through the camp with the speed of a young deer. More importantly, she had absorbed the Apache way of life as naturally as breathing. She spoke their language fluently, with only the occasional word in English that she'd picked up from traders who sometimes visited. She knew the names of every plant, every bird, every star in the night sky that Nashota had taught her, but it was her gift for seeing that set her apart even more than her unusual eyes. Ista noticed things others missed. A broken branch that meant deer had passed, the subtle shift in wind that warned of coming storms, the slight change in a person's expression that revealed hidden emotions. The elder said her different-colored eyes truly did allow her to see both the physical and spiritual worlds. "Takoda!" Ista's voice rang out one morning as she ran toward him, her small feet kicking up dust. "Takoda, come quick! The grey mare is going to have her baby today." Takoda, now 28 and one of the tribe's most respected hunters, looked up from sharpening his knife. "How do you know, little one?" "I just know," Ista insisted, tugging on his arm with both hands. "Her eyes are different, softer. And she keeps looking at the eastern hills, the way Mother Chenoa looks when she's thinking about father." Chenoa, nearby grinding corn, laughed. "The child speaks truth about me, at least. I do look east when I think of my husband's spirit." Her husband had died 2 winters ago, a loss that still ached in quiet moments. Takoda allowed himself to be pulled toward the horses. Sure enough, the grey mare stood apart from the others, her sides swollen, her breathing heavy. Within hours, she gave birth to a strong colt with a white star on its forehead. "You see?" Ista said triumphantly, gently stroking the newborn's nose. "I told you!" "My eyes see things." "Your eyes see everything," Takoda agreed, ruffling her hair. "Sometimes I think they see too much." It was true. Ista's perceptiveness sometimes unnerved the adults. She knew when someone was sad, even if they smiled. She knew when arguments were brewing before voices were raised. She once told Nashota that a visiting warrior was sick inside, and 3 days later, the man collapsed with a fever that nearly killed him. "The spirits speak to her," Nashota explained to those who questioned. "She is blessed with vision beyond sight. We should listen when she speaks." But not everyone was comfortable with Ista's abilities. Some of the younger warriors, particularly one named Chaitan, viewed her with suspicion. He was 23, ambitious, and believed strongly in tradition and purity of blood. "She is still white," Chaitan said one evening during a council meeting, his voice carrying across the fire. "No matter how well she speaks our language or how many visions she claims to have. Her people abandoned her, and we took her in out of mercy. But mercy does not make her Apache." Kuruk, now graying but still strong, fixed Chaitan with a stern look. "What makes someone Apache, Chaitan? Is it only blood? I have known men born into our tribe who betrayed us, and I have known outsiders who died defending our way of life. Where does belonging come from?" "From here," Ayana interjected, placing her hand over her heart. She was 22 now, unmarried by choice, and devoted to teaching the children. Ista was one of her best students. Ista's heart is Apache. Anyone who spends time with her knows this. Her heart may be Apache, but her face is white, Chaitan persisted. What happens when soldiers come? What happens when they see a white girl living among us? They will say we kidnapped her, and they will use it as an excuse to attack. The fear Chaitan voiced was not new. It had been whispered in various forms since the day Takoda brought Ista home, but hearing it spoken so directly in council made it feel more real, more dangerous. Takoda stood, his jaw tight. I found Ista dying on a cliff where her own people left her. If soldiers come asking about a kidnapped white child, I will tell them the truth. We saved a baby they condemned to death. We raised a child they threw away. If they want to punish us for that, then they are as cruel as the ones who abandoned her in the first place. A murmur of agreement rippled through some of the gathered people, but others remained silent, their faces troubled. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut. Outside the council circle, Ista sat with her ear pressed against the lodge wall, listening to every word. She understood more than the adults realized. She knew she was different. She knew some people saw her as a problem. She knew her presence put the people she loved at risk. Tears slipped down her cheeks, one falling from the brown eye, one from the blue. But she made no sound. She had learned early that crying attracted attention, and sometimes attention was dangerous. Instead, she wiped her face with the back of her hand and made a decision. If her presence brought danger, she would become valuable enough that the danger would be worth it. She would learn everything: hunting, tracking, healing, languages, trading. She would make herself so useful that no one could question her place among them. The next morning, Ista approached Takoda while he prepared for a hunt. "Teach me," she said simply. "Teach you what, little one?" "Everything. Teach me to hunt, to track, to read the land the way you do. I want to learn. I need to learn." Takoda knelt to her level, studying her face. Those different colored eyes looked back at him with a determination far beyond her 5 years. "Why this sudden urgency?" "Because I heard what Chaitan said. I heard his worries." Her voice didn't waver. "I want to prove I belong. I want to earn my place." Takoda's heart ached. He pulled her into a hug, holding her tight. "You don't have to earn anything, Ista. You already belong. You always have." "But they don't all believe that," she whispered against his chest. "So I will make them believe it. I will be the best. I will make you proud." "You already make me proud," Takoda said, pulling back to look at her. "Every single day. But if you want to learn, I will teach you. Not because you need to prove yourself, but because knowledge is power, and power will keep you safe." And so began Ista's true education. Every morning before dawn, she joined Takoda in the woods, learning to move silently, to read tracks, to understand animal behavior. Nashota taught her which plants healed and which ones killed. Ayana taught her history and stories. Chenoa taught her to sew, to cook, to make clothing from hide and fur. Ista absorbed it all like dry earth absorbs rain. She was tireless, focused, driven by a need to prove herself that no child should have to carry, but that she bore with grace. And slowly, as the seasons turned and Ista's skills grew, even Chaitan's criticism began to quiet. It was hard to argue that someone didn't belong when they contributed so much to the community's well-being. But in the back of everyone's mind, the question remained: how long before the white world came looking? And when it did, would love and loyalty be enough to protect the girl with 2 different eyes? 3 more winters came and went, each one carving Ista deeper into the fabric of Apache life. She was 8 years old now, tall for her age and lean from constant movement through the mountains. Her hair had darkened slightly to a honey brown, and she wore it in 2 braids adorned with small beads that Ayana had given her. But her eyes, those remained unchanged, one brown and one blue, marking her as someone caught between 2 worlds, whether she wanted to be or not. On the cool autumn morning, Ista crouched beside Takoda at the edge of a ridge, both of them perfectly still as they observed a trading post in the valley below. It was one of several that had sprung up in recent years, places where Apache and white traders met to exchange goods, furs and herbs for metal tools, cloth, and sometimes rifles. "Count them," Takoda whispered. "Tell me how many men you see and what weapons they carry." Ista's unusual eyes swept across the scene below with the precision of a hawk. 7 men, 4 carry rifles, 2 have pistols on their belts. 1, the fat one by the water barrel, has no visible weapon, but there's a bulge under his coat on the left side, probably a knife. Takoda nodded, impressed as always by her observation. "And the horses?" 11 total. 3 are cavalry horses. You can tell by the way they're groomed in the military saddles. The others are trading ponies, which means... She paused, thinking. "Which means soldiers have been here recently, maybe last night or early this morning." "Good," Takoda said. "You see like an eagle. Now should we trade today or wait?" Ista considered this carefully. It wasn't just a test question. Takoda trusted her judgment. "We wait. If soldiers were here recently, they might come back, and if they see me..." She didn't need to finish the sentence. "Smart," Takoda agreed, "but also, look at the way the traders are positioning themselves. See how they're keeping their rifles close, how they're watching the tree line. They're nervous. Something has them spooked." "Do you think they know about me?" Ista asked quietly, a tremor of fear in her voice. Takoda placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "I think they're always nervous these days. Tensions are high between our people and theirs. Every shadow looks like a threat to men who live in fear." He stood carefully, staying below the ridgeline. "Come, we'll trade at the river crossing instead. Old Marcus there doesn't ask questions." They moved silently through the forest, Ista matching Takoda's pace and careful footwork perfectly. She had become one of the best trackers in the tribe, despite her age, a source of pride for Takoda and grudging respect from even Chaitan. But their plans changed when they heard the scream. It was a woman's cry, sharp and terrified, coming from somewhere west of their position. Without discussion, both of them began running toward the sound, their feet finding purchase on the rocky ground with practiced ease. They burst into a small clearing and found a scene of chaos. A white woman, probably in her 30s, was backed against a tree, her dress torn and dirty. Her face was bleeding and her eyes were wide with terror. In front of her prowled a mountain lion, its tail lashing, its body coiled to spring. Takoda raised his bow, but the angle was wrong. The woman was directly behind the lion. If he missed, or if the arrow passed through, it could hit her. He needed a clear shot. That's when Ista did something that would be talked about around fires for years to come. She stepped into the clearing and began singing. It was an old Apache song, one that Nashota had taught her, meant to honor the spirit of the mountain lion and request its mercy. Her voice was clear and strong, carrying across the clearing with a purity that seemed to stop time itself. The lion's ears swiveled toward her, its head turned, those amber eyes fixed on the small girl with the 2 different-colored eyes who stood fearlessly between it and escape. "Ista, no!" Takoda hissed, but he didn't lower his bow. He kept it trained on the lion, ready to shoot if it attacked. Ista continued singing, taking slow, deliberate steps backward, drawing the lion's attention away from the woman. She kept her eyes on the animal, not challenging it, but acknowledging it, respecting it. In her song, she told the lion that they meant no harm, that the woman had not come to hunt or kill, that there was no need for blood today. The mountain lion watched her for what felt like an eternity. Then, with a final lash of its tail, it turned and melted into the forest, disappearing as silently as it had come. The clearing was silent except for the woman's sobbing. Ista rushed to her, helping her sit down, checking her injuries with the efficiency Nashota had taught her. "You're safe now," Ista said in English, the words feeling strange on her tongue after so many years of speaking primarily Apache. The cut on your face needs cleaning. Do you have water? The woman stared at Ista with an expression of pure shock. Her eyes moved from the brown one to the blue one and back again. Your eyes, she whispered. I've never seen... How did you do that? How did you make it leave? I asked it to, Ista said simply, pulling herbs from the small pouch at her belt. Mountain lions are reasonable if you speak their language. Takoda approached cautiously, his bow still in hand. The woman's eyes went wide again when she saw him, her body tensing despite her injuries. Please, Ista said quickly, placing herself between the woman and Takoda. He won't hurt you. He's my father. Well, not my real father, but he's family. He saved my life when I was a baby. The woman's gaze sharpened with sudden interest and suspicion. You're white, she said to Ista. What are you doing with them? Did they take you? Are you a captive? Ista felt something cold settle in her stomach. This was the question she'd always feared, the assumption she'd always dreaded. No one took me. I was abandoned by my own people and rescued by his. I'm Apache. You can't be Apache, the woman said, her voice rising with hysteria. You're white. You have to come with me. I'm from Fort Prescott. We have missionaries there, teachers. We can save you from this life. Save me? Ista interrupted, anger flaring hot in her chest. From what? From people who love me, from the only family I've ever known. You were about to be killed by that lion. I saved your life, and now you want to take me away from my home. This isn't your home, the woman insisted, trying to stand. These are savages, child. They've stolen you from civilization. No, Takoda's voice cut through, quiet, but with an edge sharp as obsidian. She was thrown away by civilization. Left on a cliff to die because of her eyes. We gave her life. We gave her love. You have no claim to her. The woman's mouth opened and closed. She looked between Takoda's stern face and Ista's defiant stance, and something in her expression shifted from righteousness to uncertainty to, finally, a kind of horrified realization. The baby, she whispered. The Whitmore baby. There were stories about a child with strange eyes. They said she died of exposure after they found her. Wrong. Her voice dropped. But that was 8 years ago. That couldn't be your her. Ista said nothing, but her silence was answer enough. The woman's name was Sarah Brennan, and she was the wife of a lieutenant stationed at Fort Prescott. She had been riding alone, foolishly as she now admitted, to visit a friend at a nearby ranch when her horse threw her and ran off. The mountain lion had cornered her an hour later, and she'd been certain her life was over until Ista appeared. Now, sitting in the clearing with her face bandaged by Ista's expert hands, Sarah couldn't stop staring at the girl. Margaret Whitmore has been in mourning for 8 years, she said quietly. She's never recovered from losing you. She wears black every day, won't speak to her husband, barely leaves her room. The guilt of what they did destroyed her. Ista's hands stilled on the bandage. Something twisted in her chest. Not sympathy exactly, but a complicated emotion she couldn't name. She let them take me, she said, her voice flat. She didn't fight for me. She was drugged, Sarah explained. Eleanor Patterson gave her laudanum after the birth. By the time Margaret woke, you were already gone. They told her you had died. She only learned the truth weeks later when Thomas finally confessed. But by then, everyone believed you were dead. They assumed the cold or the animals had... She trailed off, unable to finish. Takoda watched this exchange with growing unease. He could see the confusion on Ista's face, the war happening behind those different-colored eyes. This woman had brought the past crashing into the present, and nothing good could come from it. You cannot tell anyone about this, Takoda said firmly. If word spreads that a white child lives among us, soldiers will come. They will try to take her, and blood will be spilled. Sarah shook her head slowly. I won't have to tell anyone. The moment I return to the fort with my face bandaged and tell them how I was saved by a white girl living with Apaches, the entire territory will know. News like this spreads faster than wildfire. Then don't tell them the truth, Ista said desperately. Tell them an Apache girl saved you. Tell them anything else. And when they ask about the girl's eyes, Sarah countered gently. When they question how I survived a mountain lion attack alone, people will investigate. They always do. I'm sorry, child, but this secret was too big to keep forever. The ride back to camp was silent and tense. Takoda had considered leaving Sarah Brennan in the forest, but he wasn't a murderer, and she'd done nothing wrong except be in the wrong place at the wrong time. So they brought her back, gave her food and water, and let her rest while they decided what to do. Kuruk called an emergency council that evening. The lodge was packed with warriors, elders, and concerned families. Sarah sat to one side, guarded but treated with courtesy. Ista sat beside Takoda, feeling smaller than she had in years. This woman knows who Ista is, Kuruk said without preamble. She knows the story of her abandonment, and she has promised that when she returns to her people, word will spread. We must decide, do we let her go and prepare for what comes, or do we keep her here and risk her people coming to search for her? We can't keep her prisoner, Nashota said firmly. That would make us no better than those who would take Ista by force. We must let her go and trust in the Great Spirit to protect us. The Great Spirit didn't protect us from cavalry attacks before, Chaitan interjected bitterly. Why would he start now? This woman's words could bring down destruction on our entire camp. One white child is not worth the lives of our people. Ista flinched as if struck. The words cut deep, even though she'd heard similar sentiments whispered before. But hearing them spoken so bluntly in council, with everyone watching, made them real in a way that whispers never had. Enough! Takoda's voice cracked like thunder. He stood, his hand resting protectively on Ista's shoulder. Ista is not one white child. She is my daughter in every way that matters. She is Apache in her heart, her spirit, her actions. And I will not hear anyone in this council suggest that her life is worth less than ours. Your emotions cloud your judgment, Chaitan argued. You've become too attached to something that was never meant to be yours. That child has a mother who mourns her, a family who believes her dead. Maybe it's time to let her go back where she belongs. I belong here, Ista's voice rang out, surprising everyone, including herself. She stood, facing the council with her chin raised despite the tears threatening to fall. I don't remember anything before this camp. I don't remember white faces or white words or white ways. Everything I am, everything I know, I learned here. My mother is Chinoa, my father is Takoda, my sister is Ayana. You are my people. This is my home. Her voice broke on the last word, and Takoda pulled her against his side, his own eyes suspiciously bright. Sarah Brennan, who had been silent until now, spoke up. I see now what I didn't understand before. This child isn't a captive. She's loved. She's family. She looked directly at Kuruk. I give you my word. I will not tell anyone at the fort that she's white. I'll say an Apache girl saved me from the lion. I'll describe her as having dark eyes and darker hair. I'll keep your secret. And if they question you, Kuruk asked, if your husband or the fort commander demands details, then I'll lie, Sarah said simply. That girl saved my life today. The least I can do is protect hers. Besides, she glanced at Margaret's daughter, really looking at her. Some things are more important than the truth. Love is one of them. The council debated for hours, but eventually decided to accept Sarah's promise. They would let her go, provide her with a horse, and trust that she would keep her word. It was a risk, but keeping her prisoner was a greater one. Before Sarah left the next morning, she approached Ista one final time. "Your mother, your birth mother, never stopped loving you. She never wanted you gone. I'll find a way to tell her you're alive and safe, without revealing where you are. She deserves to know that much." Ista nodded, not trusting her voice. Part of her wanted to know more about the woman who'd carried her, who'd supposedly mourned her. But a larger part wanted nothing to do with the people who'd thrown her away. As Sarah rode away, Ista stood beside Takoda, watching until she disappeared over the ridge. "Do you think she'll keep her promise?" Ista asked quietly. "I don't know," Takoda admitted. "But whether she does or not, things have changed. We must be ready." 6 months passed after Sarah Brennan rode away from the Apache camp. 6 months of watching the horizon, of warriors taking extra shifts as sentries, of mothers keeping children closer than usual. But no soldiers came. No search parties appeared. Life slowly returned to its normal rhythm, though the underlying tension never quite disappeared. Ista threw herself into becoming even more valuable to her people. At nearly 9 years old, she could track as well as hunters twice her age, identify medicinal plants faster than Nashota, and translate between English and Apache with fluency that made her essential at trading posts. She learned to shoot a bow with deadly accuracy and to move through the forest like smoke, but it was her gift for languages that proved most valuable. When a group of Mexican traders arrived speaking Spanish, Ista surprised everyone by picking up basic phrases within days. "Languages are like songs," she explained to Ayana. "Once you understand the rhythm, the words follow." One afternoon in early spring, Ista was helping Nashota prepare medicines when a young boy ran into camp, breathless and wide-eyed. "Riders coming!" 3 white men, armed, moving fast. The camp exploded into controlled chaos. Women grabbed children, warriors took positions. Kuruk emerged from his lodge, his face set in grim determination. Takoda appeared at Ista's side almost immediately, his hand on her shoulder. "Go to the cave," he ordered, "now." They had prepared for this. The cave was a hidden shelter 2 miles north, stocked with supplies and known only to the inner circle of the tribe. It was where they would hide Ista if white men ever came looking. But Ista shook her head. "What if they're just traders? What if this has nothing to do with me? If I run every time white men appear, I'll spend my whole life hiding." "Better hiding than captured," Takoda said firmly. "Let me at least see them first," Ista pleaded. "From a distance. If they're looking for me, I'll know it. I'll see it in their faces, their movements. You know I can read people." Takoda hesitated, torn between logic and fear. Finally, he nodded. "From the ridge. Hidden. At the first sign of danger, you run." They positioned themselves on high ground, overlooking the main approach to camp. Through the trees, they watched as 3 riders came into view. They weren't soldiers. Their clothes were civilian, their horses were work animals, rather than cavalry mounts. The lead rider held up his hand in a gesture of peace. Kuruk and several warriors met them at the camp's edge, weapons visible but not raised. From her hidden position, Ista could just barely hear the conversation. "We mean no trouble," the lead rider said. He was middle-aged with a weathered face and kind eyes. "Name's Robert Henderson. I'm a rancher from east of Prescott Ridge. This is my son James and my foreman Dutch. We're here about a missing child." Ista's blood ran cold. Beside her, Takoda's hand moved to his knife. "We have no missing children," Kuruk said evenly. "Not missing from here," Henderson clarified. "Missing from Prescott Ridge. 8, almost 9 years ago. A baby girl with unusual eyes. 1 brown, 1 blue. There are rumors that she survived, that someone took her in. I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm here because her mother deserves to know the truth." Many rumors blow through these mountains, Kuruk replied. Most are just wind. Henderson nodded slowly. Fair enough, but I have to ask, is there any truth to this particular wind? Because if that child is alive, wherever she is, her mother hasn't stopped grieving. Sarah Brennan came back from visiting us 6 months ago with stories about a girl who calmed a mountain lion. A girl with remarkable eyes. She tried to lie, said the girl was Apache through and through, but my wife has known Sarah since childhood. She knows when Sarah's hiding something. So, the secret hadn't held. Ista felt her stomach sink. Sarah had tried, but people were too observant, too suspicious. Even if such a child existed, Kuruk said carefully, what makes you think she would want to return to people who abandoned her? What makes you think she isn't happy where she is? I don't claim to know what she wants, Henderson said, but her mother has the right to know she's alive. Just that. Not to take her away, not to claim her back, just to know her daughter didn't die alone on that cliff. Her daughter did die, Dakota called out, emerging from the trees with Ista behind him. He'd made a decision, one that scared Ista, but also filled her with gratitude. The white baby died. What grew in her place was Apache. Henderson's eyes found Ista, and she saw the moment recognition hit him. His face went pale, his breath caught, and his hand trembled slightly on his reins. My God, he whispered. It's true. Ista stepped forward, her head high despite her pounding heart. I don't know Margaret Whitmore. I don't remember anything before this camp. These are my people. Dakota is my father. This is my home. No one is disputing that, Henderson said gently, but I made a promise to Margaret. She saved my wife's life during a difficult childbirth years ago. When I heard the rumors, I swore I'd find out the truth. Please, just let me tell her you're alive and well. That's all she wants to know. And what happens when she wants more? Dakota demanded. When she decides her daughter should be civilized, when she brings soldiers to rescue what doesn't need rescuing. Margaret Whitmore has no power, Henderson said. Her husband died 2 years ago. She lives alone in that big house with nothing but regret for company. She won't bring soldiers. She can barely bring herself to leave her room. Ista looked up at Dakota, then at Kuruk, then back at Henderson. She thought about the woman she'd never known, the mother who supposedly mourned her, a part of her, a small hidden part, wondered what it would be like to meet her, to look into the face that had first looked into hers. Tell her I'm alive, Ista said finally. Tell her I'm happy. Tell her I'm loved. Tell her I forgive her for not fighting harder. Her voice cracked slightly. But also, tell her that I'm not coming back. This is where I belong. Henderson nodded, his own eyes moist. I'll tell her exactly that. Thank you. He paused. What name do you go by now? Ista Nompa, she said clearly. It means 2 eyes. It's a good name, Henderson said softly. A fitting name. He gathered his reins, preparing to leave. I won't tell anyone else where you are, but I can't promise others won't come looking. 3 weeks after Henderson's visit, a single rider appeared on the horizon at dawn. It was a woman, traveling alone on a grey mare, wearing a black dress and a wide-brimmed hat. She rode slowly, deliberately, as if every step brought both hope and terror. The sentries spotted her immediately and alerted the camp. Dakota knew who it was before anyone said a word. He found Ista by the stream, washing her face in the cold water, and the look on his face told her everything. She's here, isn't she? Ista said quietly. My birth mother. Dakota nodded. You don't have to see her. I can send her away. But Ista surprised herself with her answer. No, I want to see her. I need to know who I would have been if I'd stayed. Margaret Whitmore dismounted at the edge of camp with trembling hands. Up close, she was thin, almost frail, with grey streaking through dark hair that must have once been beautiful. Her face was lined with years of sorrow, and her eyes, one brown, one blue, just like Ista's, were red-rimmed from crying. When those eyes found Ista standing beside Takoda, Margaret's knees nearly gave out. She pressed a hand to her mouth, and a sound escaped, half sob, half prayer. "You have her eyes," were the first words Margaret spoke. "I always wondered if you would." Ista said nothing, just watched this stranger who claimed her by blood, but not by love. Margaret took a hesitant step forward, then stopped when Takoda tensed. "I'm not here to take you," Margaret said quickly. "Henderson told me what you said, that you're happy here, that these are your people. I just needed to see you, to know you're real, to tell you—" Her voice broke. "To tell you I'm sorry." "For what?" Ista asked, her voice colder than she intended. "For being weak," Margaret whispered. "For taking the laudanum. For not fighting them when they took you. For believing them when they said it was for the best. For not searching for you when I learned the truth. For everything." Kuruk and Nashota stood nearby, watching carefully. Chenoa had emerged from her lodge, her face unreadable. Ayana held back the curious children who wanted to see the white woman. The entire camp felt like it was holding its breath. "They told me you were cursed," Margaret continued, taking another small step closer. "Eleanor said your eyes meant you were touched by evil, that keeping you would bring destruction. I was so tired, so confused, and I believed her. I was foolish and scared, and I let them take the most precious thing I'd ever had." Tears streamed freely down her face now. "I've spent 8 years dying inside, wondering if you suffered, if you called for me, if you knew I didn't want to let you go." "I didn't call for you," Ista said, and though her words were harsh, her voice wavered. "I don't remember you at all. The first face I remember is his." She looked up at Takoda. "He's the one who heard me crying. He's the one who saved me. He's the one who stayed." Margaret nodded, more tears falling. "I know, and I'm grateful to him, more than words can say." She looked at Takoda with genuine appreciation. "Thank you for giving my daughter life when I couldn't." "She's not your daughter anymore," Takoda said firmly but not cruelly. "She's mine, she's ours." "I know," Margaret whispered, "and I'm not asking to change that. I just wanted to see her, to tell her I never stopped loving her, even when I thought she was gone. To ask if maybe sometimes I could visit, just to know she's all right." This question hung in the air like smoke. Ista looked at Takoda, at Kuruk, at Nashota. She saw concern on their faces, but also something else, a willingness to let her decide. "Why would you want to visit someone you don't even know?" Ista asked. "Because you're my daughter," Margaret said simply. "Blood doesn't stop being blood just because time passes or circumstances change. I don't expect you to call me mother. I don't expect you to love me. I just want to know you're in this world. That's all I've ever wanted." Ista felt something shift in her chest. This woman had hurt her by failing to protect her, yes. But looking at Margaret's ravaged face, at the years of grief carved into every line and shadow, Ista saw something she recognized. The same kind of love Chenoa showed, the same kind of fierce devotion that made mothers sacrifice everything for their children. Margaret had sacrificed her own happiness, her own life to the guilt of losing her daughter. That was its own kind of love, however broken. "Once a season," Ista said finally. "You can visit once a season, but you come alone, you come in peace, and you accept that I'm Apache. You don't try to change me or save me or civilize me, understood?" Margaret nodded so hard her hat nearly fell off. Yes, I promise. I swear on everything I hold sacred." "And," Ista added, her voice stronger now, "you tell me about your world, about the white people's ways. Not to make me join them, but so I understand what I'm protecting myself from. Knowledge is power. That's what Takoda taught me." "I'll tell you whatever you want to know," Margaret said. "Thank you. Thank you for this chance." The first visit lasted only an hour. They sat across from each other with Takoda nearby, speaking of small things: the weather, the journey Margaret made, the ranch Henderson owned. It was awkward and strange, two people connected by biology but separated by everything else. But when Margaret mounted her horse to leave, she paused and looked back at Ista. "You're exactly what I would have wanted you to be," she said softly. "Strong and brave and true. I just wish I'd been the one to raise you into it." "Maybe you wouldn't have," Ista replied honestly. "Maybe I needed this life to become who I am." Margaret nodded sadly. "Maybe. But I'll spend the rest of my life wondering." As Margaret rode away, Takoda put his arm around Ista's shoulders. "Are you all right?" Ista leaned against him. "I don't know. I thought I'd feel angry, but I just feel sad. For her, for what she lost, for what we both lost." "That's called compassion," Nashota said, approaching them. "It's the mark of a wise heart. You're growing up, little one." 4 years had passed since Margaret's first visit. Ista was now 13, no longer a child, but not yet a woman, caught in that liminal space between two stages of life, just as she was caught between two worlds. She had grown tall and lean, her skills sharp as obsidian blades. She could out-track most of the warriors, spoke 4 languages fluently, and had become indispensable as a translator and negotiator at trading posts throughout the territory. Margaret kept her promise, visiting once each season without fail. Over time, the awkwardness between them had softened into something resembling friendship. They would never have the bond of mother and daughter. That place belonged to Chenoa, but they had found their own connection. Margaret taught Ista to read and write in English, brought books about history and science, and answered endless questions about the white world. In return, Ista shared stories of Apache life, taught Margaret words in her language, and allowed her glimpses into a culture Margaret had once feared. On a warm autumn afternoon, as golden leaves drifted down around them, Margaret arrived for her seasonal visit with unusual urgency in her posture. Her face was drawn, her hands gripping the reins too tightly. "What's wrong?" Ista asked immediately, her gift for reading people alerting her to danger. Margaret dismounted quickly. "I need to speak with Kuruk and the council. There's trouble coming." Within the hour, the tribe's leaders gathered in the council lodge. Margaret stood before them, her black dress dusty from hard riding, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "There's a new cavalry commander at Fort Prescott," she began, "Colonel Richard Marston. He's ambitious, cruel, and looking to make a name for himself by pacifying the Apache. He's heard the rumors about Ista, about a white girl living among you, and he's decided to use it as justification for an attack." The council erupted in angry murmurs. Chaitan stood immediately. "I warned this would happen. That girl has brought exactly what I feared." "Sit down," Kuruk commanded. "Let her finish." Margaret continued. "Marston is planning a raid in 2 weeks. He's telling everyone it's a rescue mission, but I've heard him talking. He wants to burn your camp, kill your warriors, and take your women and children to reservations. Ista is just his excuse." "Why would you warn us?" Hania asked suspiciously. "You're one of them." "I'm a mother," Margaret replied firmly. "And I won't let my daughter be used as an excuse for murder. Besides, after all these visits, I've seen the truth. You're not savages, you're people, families, and what Marston wants to do is wrong." Takoda spoke up. "What do you suggest we do?" Margaret took a deep breath. "I have an idea, but it's dangerous. And it requires Ista." All eyes turned to the 13-year-old girl sitting beside Takoda. Ista felt the weight of their gazes but kept her voice steady. "Tell me." "I could bring you to Fort Prescott," Margaret said, "publicly. Show everyone that you're well, happy, and choosing to stay with the Apache. If people see you speaking for yourself, see that you're not a captive, it undermines Marston's entire justification for the attack. Absolutely not, Dakota said immediately. It's a trap. They'll never let her leave. I'll be with her the entire time, Margaret insisted. And I'll bring witnesses. Robert Henderson, Sarah Brennan, others who know the truth and have standing in the community. We'll make it a public event. Marston can't kidnap her in front of dozens of witnesses without revealing his true intentions. He could arrest you both, Nashota pointed out. Claim you're collaborating with the enemy. He could try, Margaret admitted, but I own the largest property in Prescott Ridge. I have influence and friends. It's a risk, yes, but it's better than letting him slaughter innocent people. Ista looked up at Dakota, then around at the council. These were her people, her family. The thought of leaving camp, even temporarily, filled her with fear. But the thought of watching them die because of her existence was unbearable. I'll do it, she said. No, Dakota said firmly. Yes, Ista countered, standing to face him. You taught me that knowledge is power, that courage means doing what's right even when you're afraid. This is right. I can speak for myself, for all of us. I can show them that we're not enemies. What if they don't listen? Dakota's voice cracked with emotion. What if I lose you? Ista took his hands in hers. You won't lose me. I'll come back. I promise. I always come back. She turned to the council. I was thrown away once for being different. I won't let anyone use me as an excuse to hurt the people who saved me. Let me try. The debate lasted hours, but eventually a decision was reached. Ista would go to Fort Prescott with Margaret, accompanied by Dakota and 2 other warriors who would stay nearby but out of sight. They would attend a public gathering where Ista would speak. If anything went wrong, the warriors would create a distraction for escape. That night, as Ista packed a small bag, Ayana came to her. Are you scared? Terrified, Ista admitted. Good, Ayana said, pulling her into a hug. Fear makes you careful. Just remember who you are. You're Ista Nompa, the girl who calms mountain lions, who sees both worlds, who survived being thrown from a cliff. Nothing can break you. As Ista tried to sleep that night, she thought about the journey ahead. She would finally see the world that had rejected her, speak to the people who had once called her cursed. She would stand before them with her 2 different-colored eyes and show them that she was not a demon or a victim. She was a bridge, and bridges connected worlds. The courtyard of Fort Prescott was packed with people, soldiers in uniform, settlers in their Sunday best, curious townspeople crowding every available space. Word had spread quickly about the rescued white girl who would speak publicly about her life among the Apache. Some came out of genuine curiosity, others for spectacle, and still others because Colonel Marston had strongly encouraged attendance. Ista stood on a wooden platform, her heart pounding but her posture straight. She wore traditional Apache clothing, a buckskin dress decorated with intricate beadwork that Ayana had made for her. Her hair was braided with colored threads, and around her neck hung a necklace of turquoise that Nashota had blessed. She looked exactly like what she was, Apache in every way, except the color of her skin. Beside her stood Margaret, dressed in her usual black, but holding her head high with quiet determination. Robert Henderson and Sarah Brennan flanked the platform, there as promised witnesses. Somewhere in the crowd, hidden among the faces, Dakota watched with his hand on his knife, ready to fight his way to her if needed. Colonel Marston stood at the edge of the platform, his expression carefully neutral, but his eyes cold and calculating. He was a thin man with a sharp face and sharper ambitions. When the crowd settled, he spoke. Ladies and gentlemen, we're gathered here today to welcome back a child who was stolen from civilization 8 years ago. This girl, born to good Christian parents, was taken by Apache raiders and raised in savagery. Today, we offer her the chance to return to her rightful place among her own people. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Ista felt anger kindle in her chest, but kept her face calm. She had learned patience from Nashota, control from Takoda. "That's not what happened," Ista said clearly, her voice carrying across the courtyard. "I wasn't stolen. I was abandoned." The crowd fell silent. Marston's jaw tightened. Ista continued, "I was born with eyes of two different colors. The midwife said I was cursed, that I would bring evil. So they took me to Devil's Edge and left me to die in the snow. I was hours old. If an Apache warrior named Takoda hadn't heard my cries, I would have frozen to death on that cliff." Gasps erupted from the crowd. Some people looked skeptical, but many turned to look at the elders of Prescott Ridge, who shifted uncomfortably. "That's preposterous," Marston began. "It's true," Margaret interrupted, stepping forward. "I'm Margaret Whitmore, I'm her birth mother, and every word she says is true. We threw her away because we were afraid of what made her different." Her voice broke, but she continued. "The Apache gave her what we couldn't, love without condition." "I have a question for all of you," Ista said, looking out at the sea of faces. "What makes someone belong somewhere? Is it the color of their skin, the place they were born, or is it where their heart lives?" She touched her chest. "My heart lives with the Apache. They're my family. They taught me to hunt, to heal, to survive. They taught me that being different isn't a curse, it's a gift." She turned her face so both of her eyes caught the sunlight, one brown, one blue, both steady and unafraid. "These eyes that made you call me cursed. The Apache call them blessed. They say I see both worlds, and maybe they're right, because standing here I see both. I see your fear of what's different, but I also see people like Margaret, like Sarah, like Robert, who chose kindness over fear." "This is ridiculous," Marston snapped. "The girl has been brainwashed. She doesn't know what she wants." "I know exactly what I want," Ista said fiercely. "I want to go home, to my real home, with my real family, and I want you to stop using me as an excuse to hurt innocent people. The Apache never stole me. They saved me. If you attack them, you're not rescuing anyone. You're just proving that the real savages wear uniforms." The crowd erupted. Some shouted in agreement, others in anger. But Ista saw something shift, doubt creeping into faces that had been certain, questions replacing blind hatred. Marston tried to speak again, but Henderson stepped forward. "I think the girl has said enough." And she said it clearly. She's not a captive. She's not brainwashed. She's making a choice. And in America, don't we believe in freedom of choice? The tension held for a long moment. Then Sarah Brennan began to clap. One person, then another, then dozens joined until the courtyard rang with applause. Not everyone clapped. Marston certainly didn't, but enough did to change something fundamental. That evening, as Ista rode away from Fort Prescott with Margaret beside her and Takoda trailing safely behind, she looked back one last time at the world that had rejected her. She felt no bitterness, only relief. She had spoken her truth, claimed her identity, and chosen her family. When they reached the place where Takoda waited, Ista dismounted and ran into his arms. He held her tight, and she felt him trembling. "I told you I'd come back," she whispered. "You did more than come back," he said, pulling away to look at her face, those remarkable, beautiful, different-colored eyes that had once been called cursed. "You built a bridge. You changed minds. You're everything I always knew you were." Years later, when people told the story of Ista Nompa, they spoke of different things. Some remembered her as the white girl who chose to be Apache. Others remembered her as the bridge between two worlds. But those who knew her best, Takoda, Chenoa, Ayana, Nashota, and yes, even Margaret, they remembered her as something simpler and more profound. They remembered her as loved, And in the end, isn't that what we all want? To be seen for who we truly are and loved anyway? Easter Nonpa proved that family isn't defined by blood or the color of your eyes. It's defined by who stays when everyone else walks away. It's defined by who hears your cries in the wilderness and chooses to answer.